Good morning, councillors, and a warm welcome to everyone to the meeting today and those watching online. Can I remind elected members and the public of the proposed timings for today's meeting as set out on today's agenda? Can I ask Linda Brown to take a roll call of the attendance, please?
Good morning, councillors. When I call out your name, can you please confirm that you're present? Councillor Ahern.
Present.
Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Baird. Councillor Baird, I know I did see her on the list of those in attendance. I'll go down and come back to Councillor Baird. Councillor Barnacle.
Present.
Councillor Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Brock. You didn't see Councillor Brock. We'll come back to Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Audrey is here.
Councillor Harry Coates is about. Councillor Stuart Donaldson.
Present.
Councillor Eric Drysdale.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Forbes.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor Lyle.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McDade.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Sorry, was that
Present.
Thanks.
Yeah, somebody close.
Councillor Malloy. Oh, sorry, Provost Malloy. Apologies.
Present.
Councillor Parrott.
Present.
Councillor Pover.
Present.
Councillor Purvis.
Present.
Councillor Rebick.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Councillor Sarwar.
She's just said she's having trouble trying to get in.
Yeah, I think there's a few. I'll come back to these. Councillor Shires.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Waters.
Present.
Councillor Williamson.
Present.
Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Now, could we go back to is Councillor Baird?
Yes, I am here now. Very sorry, some technical problems this morning.
No, that's okay. Councillor Brock.
Yes, I'm here now. I'm now in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Audrey Coates.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Harry Coates' apologies. So,
That's
Councillor Sarwar.
Yeah, present now.
Thank you. That's all present, Provost.
Thank you, Linda. Can I ask members, are there any declarations of interest at today's meeting? If a member indicates DI in the conversation, can you make your declaration in the order as they appear, please? Right. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. In terms of section 5.8 of the Councillors' Code of Conduct and as Chair of Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board, I declare a non-financial interest in item 8 on today's agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Similar non-financial interest in paper 8 as a member of the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to declare a non-financial interest in item 9 as a member of the Adult Protection Committee.
Can I ask some of our IT people, the blue boxes are coming up and hiding the names, I can hardly see them. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. A non-financial interest in item 8 as a member of Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purvis.
A similar non-financial interest as a member of the Integration Joint Board in paper 8.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Are there any further direct? No, there isn't. That's fine. Can I now ask if you'll approve the previous minute of the 30th of July? You all approve?
Agreed.
Question.
Yes. Somebody asked for a question.
Thanks, Provost. It's Councillor Stewart here. I wonder, there's a reference in the minute of the meeting. I've been emailing the Chief Executive and the Head of Legal and Governance Services. Under item 4 in the minute, recommendation 3 has a clause which wasn't in the recommendations of the corresponding paper 20/124 for the meeting of the 30th of July.
Thank you. Lisa, would you like to respond to Councillor Stewart?
Clearly, apologies, and yes, there has been some communications on this, but we're having these communications live as we speak. In terms of the minute, that is the minute that the clerk has taken and is clearly reflective of what he believes was resolved at the council meeting. Unfortunately, the clerk is on leave and I can't actually, that seems to reflect the discussion, and that is a reflection of what the clerk believes was resolved at that meeting. Which particular point is the accuracy being challenged over?
It's the inclusion of the central clause in recommendation 3 from item 4. Replacing the Modernising Governance Member Officer Working Group wasn't included in the recommendations from the report, which was moved, seconded and agreed, as far as I could establish from watching the recording of the meeting, without alteration or amendment.
I really would need to speak to the clerk and get him to go back and check his notes, but unfortunately he's on leave. I could take that as an action to pick up with him when he comes back, and if there are a further modification to be made, then we can pick that up at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Members, I'll now hand you over to Deputy Provost to take the papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. I'm having a bit of problems with my technology this morning, so you'll just have to bear with me till I get this chat box sorted out. So in the meantime, can I invite Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and good morning, councillors. This report advises Council of Treasury activity undertaken during the quarter ended 30th of June this year. As elected members will appreciate, the period April to June saw an unparalleled movement in economic indicators as coronavirus and national lockdowns impacted upon the UK and wider global economies. There was no new borrowing undertaken or any maturing loans repaid during the quarter, so the Council's long-term debt remained unchanged at just over £541 million. Short-term market loans were used to manage cash flow during a period when the Council both incurred additional expenditure in responding to COVID-19 and generated less income. The Council's total investments stood at £208.8 million at the end of the quarter, with total investment income of £418,000 generated on investment activity during the quarter. The level of investments held by the Council reflects borrowing undertaken last financial year, as PWLB rates reached historic lows. Additional funding provided by the Scottish Government in response to COVID-19 and slippage in the Council's capital programme in the current year during the lockdown period. The separate Treasury and Investment Strategy report to this meeting of the Council considers the management of the Council's investments over the coming period. There will be no breaches in compliance with Treasury and investment policy, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. Happy to take questions, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Can I ask, are there any questions? I'm sorry, I'm just having a bit problems with the chat at the moment. It's most disturbing, let me tell you. So if someone has got a question, would they please just speak at the moment till I get this sorted out. Has anyone got a question for Stuart Mackenzie?
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Braun, if I may, just a quick question. Okay.
And item 2, Councillor Donaldson.
Councillor Braun.
Okay, a very quick question for Mr. Mackenzie, if I may. Well, there's a lot of talk around at the moment of the prospect of negative interest rates coming because of the economy. My logic would say that if the negative rates are positive, we earn interest. If they're negative, that would seem to be that we have to pay the institution to look after the money. If that's the case, how will it affect our income if we go into negative interest rates?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Braun. Yes, and some of that speculation is covered in the coming report. What we are seeing is a reduction in investment returns over the piece, but if you have a look at the appendices to this report, what you'll see is a return of 0.96% on our investments against a base rate of 0.1%. So we're still, if I can put it this way, ahead of the game in that respect, but yes, it will impact on our investment returns going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. Could I turn to page 24? It's on investments. The one noticeable change over the quarter is the actual total amount of investments it's very slightly higher. There's been quite a big swing from investments with banks to money market funds, and in particular to other local authorities. And the latter, the local authorities, has gone from 32.5 million to now 45 million. And the actual return is very slightly less now than with banks. But the key point I want to ask is, Stuart, is with other local authorities, that 45 million, how many local authorities does that apply with, and how do we assess counterparty risk?
Stuart Mackenzie, can you answer that one, please?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Donaldson. I'm actually trying to add up the names on the list. At the moment, we have around about 25 deposits with other local authorities as a counterparty. A counterparty risk is assessed initially in advice with our Treasury advisors link. And I understand the underlying concern you may have, because there has been some negative commentary on some local authorities, particularly in England, over the last couple of years. Yep. I think it's a watching brief, to be honest, and what we have is a mixture of investments with other Scottish local authorities and English authorities, most of which are fairly substantial. If there was any indication or contraindication, then we would obviously look to review who we were making investments with. My understanding is that it would actually take an act of Parliament to dissolve or change the structure of local government. So to some extent, to the same extent as we enjoy, these authorities in England enjoy the same statutory protections as we do.
Okay, thank you. It's just I can see what you're doing. You're trying to spread the portfolio, and that's understandable. But there is probably a greater specific risk with perhaps, say, one of the local authorities than would apply with a bank. Yeah. It's just something that's got to be constantly assessed. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, as I've said, as I can't see the chat, the Chief Executive can, so she will call out the name of the members who are going to speak next until we can get this problem resolved. I don't think I'm the only one who's got this issue this morning. So I'll ask the Chief Executive to ask who's got the next question.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillors, I don't see anyone else with a question in the chat, and just to make sure that I'm actually seeing everything that's there, can you notify me if you do have a question to ask, please, by putting a Q in the chat function. Thank you. Councillor Barnacle, please. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Karen. Just following up on Councillor Donaldson's query in relation to investments in other local authorities. On the same counter, could Stuart advise how much investment other local authorities have with us? Does he have that figure?
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle, for your question. I don't have that figure to hand, but members will see from the commentary that we have been using market loans. A lot of those market loans financed through other local authorities investing short term with us. But I'm sorry, I don't have that position will change daily, but I don't have that position to hand.
Thank you.
Councillors, there are no further questions in the chat function.
Chief Executive, I did see Councillor Barnacle it flashed up. I saw Councillor Barnacle had a question that seemed to flash over my screen.
I think we've just dealt with that, Deputy Provost.
Sorry.
Has there any further questions? In that case, Provost, I will leave you to take forward the conduct of business. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions, can I now ask Councillor Lyle to move this report, please?
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and I look forward to a quick, speedy resolution of your technical issues. Deputy Provost, this report provides a summary of Treasury management activity for the first quarter of this financial year. During the quarter, there was no new Public Works Loan Board borrowing undertaken, and the Council's long-term debt position has remained unchanged. Short-term borrowing was, however, used to manage cash flow during the lockdown period, when both the Council's expenditure and income were placed under considerable pressure. All of these amounts have since been repaid in full, and I would ask the Council to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask Councillor Duff to second the report?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd just like to thank Mr Jennings and Mr Mackenzie for setting out the Council's Treasury activity and compliance for the quarter. As always, the prudent and professional management of this Council's finances is evident for all to see. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments on this report? If I don't see any comments on my phone, but I may be proved wrong. As if no one is talking, I take it there are no comments, so we're happy to agree this report. Thank you very much. We now go on to paper 5, Treasury and Investment Strategy and Prudential Indicators 2021-2028-29. Can I now invite Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to introduce this report?
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and a little bit more of the same. The report considers both the Council's borrowing requirements to deliver its approved capital programme and maintain day-to-day cash flow, the Treasury strategy, and the management of short-term cash surpluses, the annual investment strategy. The report has been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the CIPFA Code of Practice and the Local Government Investment Regulations. The Council's current projected borrowing requirement over a 9-year period 2020-21 to 2028-29 is detailed in section 3 of the report and totals just under £468 million. The borrowing requirement is front weighted with £326 million or 70% of this amount currently anticipated to be required over the next 4 years. Section 4 and appendices 1 and 2 to the report show forecasts on bank rates and Public Works Loan Board rates by the Council's Treasury Advisors Link Asset Services. As elected members will appreciate, forecasts in the current economic climate are highly uncertain and subject to revision. In general terms, however, Both bank rates, which provide an indication of a level of return the council might expect on short-term investments, and PWLB borrowing rates are expected to remain low, then gradually rise as the economy starts to recover. As previously reported, the council undertook £170 million of PWLB borrowing last financial year when rates fell to historic lows. The proposed Treasury strategy set out in Section 5 therefore assumes no immediate requirement to undertake new borrowing in either the current year or in 2021-22. However, given the future requirements of the capital programme, further borrowing should be considered if there is a significant fall in rates. The proposed annual investment strategy set out in Section 6 and Appendix 3 to the report assumes a gradual reduction in the level of investments held by the council in line with planned expenditure. There is no change to the proposed permitted investments, which will assess as low risk, or monetary limits, apart from a proposed increase in investments made for over 365 days to £45 million in line with the higher investment balances held by the council. The proposed annual property investment strategy, 2020-21, is detailed in Appendix 4 to the report and is forecast to generate £1.8 million of income in the current year. As set out in Section 10 and Appendix 5 to the report, the prudential indicators have been updated following consideration of the capital budget by Council on the 30th of September. The prudential indicators are intended to ensure that the Council's borrowing remains affordable and sustainable over the longer term. All Treasury and investment activity undertaken in accordance with the approved strategy will be monitored and reported to Council on an ongoing basis through the quarterly Treasury activity reports. Happy to take questions, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackenzie. Can I ask members of any questions? I do not see any questions coming up on my phone, but I am maybe wrong. So if anyone has a question, I've missed it.
Yes.
For them to speak now, please.
Yes.
Councillor Donaldson, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Could I turn, Stuart, to page 32, and it's item 2.3, and you mentioned about the borrowing last year, 170 million, and I think that was all carried out before the Public Works Loan Board, i.e. the Treasury, raised rates across the board by 1 percentage point. What I really want to ask is the two sentences at the end of that para. There's the position on social housing, and that's announced on 12th of March. But what I really want to ask about is it states the Public Works Loan Board are also currently consulting on new lending terms which may lead to reduced rates for other infrastructure investment. What I'd like to ask you on that is how long you think those consultations may take, and in particular what I'd like to ask is, do you have any kind of steer on what might be included under other infrastructure investment, in particular if we were to look at potential new projects? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson, for your question. The consultation exercise has been ongoing for some time, and I would have been hopeful that we would have had some clarity. However, that position hasn't been resolved. There has been feedback, both from the Directors of Finance section in Scotland and from the LGA, and I believe COSLA have also provided feedback on the exercise as well. It's been hopeful that we would have had some clarity. So that position hasn't been resolved. There has been feedback, both from the Directors of Finance section in Scotland and from the LGA, and I believe COSLA have also provided feedback on the exercise as well. It's been hopeful that we would have had some clarity. Apologies, councillors, I've a rather strange feedback loop myself. So there's no clarity at the moment on what the position might be. However, there is some hopeful speculation, perhaps, that we might see a reduction in borrowing rates for particular types of investment. What that investment might be, again, I don't have any details at the moment, Councillor Donaldson. I think, however, it may well be linked to broader government objectives in terms of a response to COVID-19 and stimulating growth in the economy.
Could I thank you, Stuart? The reason I did ask the question is, very crudely, on 30, 50-year money, and if you're paying, your interest rate is 1.5%, let's say, or thereabouts, compared to 2.5%, that really makes a fundamental difference, the charge to revenue on projects, and it really is quite significant.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. In fact, it would be something, and I think also the budget review groups, it really would be helpful, if you could just, and I say this with all the groups, if you could keep us updated on that, because I think it is a material factor going forward. Thank you.
I'm happy to provide that update, Councillor Dawson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think we have a question from Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question relates to Appendix 4, so page 2, I think, item 5, in connection with our current property portfolio. Given the changes that are taking place in our town and city centres at the moment, do we have any idea how secure the leases on, particularly in the shops, offices, industrial premises are? And have we any indication that any of these leases will want to be altered in any way, given the current uncertainty, both with COVID-19 and indeed with Brexit?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Simpson. My colleague David Lawton-John.
Yes, to answer it, yes.
Thanks very much for the question, Councillor Simpson. As things stand at the moment, none of our tenants have indicated that their intention is to quit their leases. We have, as you're probably aware, a number of tenants have requested rent deferrals, which we've been very sympathetic to, and have offered throughout the pandemic period since March. But at the moment, as things stand, we're not aware of any of our tenants, certainly, who have lodged a notice to quit.
Thank you. Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Again for Stuart. Paragraph 5.1, Stuart, states that there is no immediate need to borrow in 2020-22 based on current planned expenditure. My question is, does that take account of the recent capital budget decisions we made last week to be updated in February 21? Because we did make some further commitments, I think. Could you just have clarity on that?
Absolutely, Councillor Barnacle, yes. Essentially, because we're sitting with a relatively high investment balance, and the intention would be to run that down over the next few years rather than borrow, because we've already undertaken the borrowing and secured the value. So that recognises our borrowing requirements, certainly in the first couple of years, both in the current year and next year. And the figures you're seeing in section, apologies if I can just reference the table and the support in paragraph 3.2, that reflects the decisions which were taken by Council last Wednesday.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, Provost Depute. I had a question with regard to paragraph 10.6 for Mr. Mackenzie, and I wanted to ask, ideally, how would the council consider both its investment limits and its prudential indicators? There's been something like a year's gap or slightly more between the altering the investment limits and catching up with the prudential indicators. Now, clearly, COVID's intervened significantly during that period, but I just wanted to know, in ordinary circumstances, how quickly would we be aligning these two parallel limits?
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett, for your question, and that's a fair point. And we would normally seek to do that in line with the setting of the capital budget. So we've obviously had, because we weren't able to have that meeting in June, and we've obviously got a slight misalignment in terms of timing. The point is fair. We'd normally try and align those two things, because essentially what we're doing in the prudential indicators is providing an estimate of what's affordable. So that really needs to inform the capital budget process. So we'd align those two activities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. Anybody looking for questions? So in that case, can I ask Councillor Lyle to move the report, please?
Thank you very. Just bear with me. Yep. Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. This report details the proposed Treasury and investment strategies. Last week, the Council approved an ambitious capital programme, and this report considers the Treasury strategy necessary to finance it. Although the Council's requirement to borrow will increase over time and in line with the capital programme, the prudent Treasury activity undertaken last year means there is no forecast need for new borrowing in this current and the next financial year. The investment strategy details the anticipated investment activities of the Council. There are no proposed changes in who the Council invests with, and these continue to reflect low-risk investments. There is, however, a proposed change to the limit for investments over 12 months to bring this in line with the revised limits approved by the Council last year. The report also updates the Council's prudential indicators to reflect the decisions taken on the capital programme last week. I would ask the Council to approve this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Deputy Provost. The various strategies for Treasury, investment and housing are designed to ensure that the Council achieves the best possible returns on its borrowings and investments while minimising the risks. This update on these strategies continues the fine tradition of financial management recognised within this Council, and we thank the Senior Accountant and Head of Finance for their presentation. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. I will now invite members to make comment on the report. I do not. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, rather than just asking questions this time, I do think actually what I referred to about on reduced rates, potentially reduced rates from the Public Works Loan Board on new lending terms, and in particular on the reference to other infrastructure investment, really does matter. I hear what's being said about no further new borrowing this year or next financial year, but circumstances may yet change, and if we can come forward with sustainable projects and ones that work, certainly a reduction in the rate from, let us say, 2.5% to 1.5% on long-term money really would be, I think, quite fundamental, and it opens up possibilities in terms of any financing package, financing options for sustainable new projects. I think in particular, clearly, what we debated last Wednesday, that may well be applicable in respect of PH2O, and it could be an important element of that. But that is, I think, sufficient for the moment to say we need updates on that, but it is a material factor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Are there any other members wish to make comment? No, I don't see anyone else wishing to make comment, so we will agree the report. Thank you very much. We now move on to paper 6 with the annual audited accounts 2019-2020 and the annual audit report to the members of Perth Kinross Council and the controller of the audit for the year ended 31st of March. Since the agenda was printed, we now know that Chris Weedett and Alec Berwick from our external external auditors, KPMG, are attending the meeting and they are available to answer any questions from members on the annual report. So I will now invite Stuart Mackenzie to introduce this report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This report presents the Council's audited accounts for 2019-20 and the accompanying annual report by the Council's external auditors, KPMG. The unaudited accounts were submitted to the Council's external auditors on the 29th of June and were considered by the Audit Committee in July. The audit was undertaken remotely throughout the summer, and the draft audited accounts and annual audit report for 2019-20 was scrutinised and approved by the Audit Committee on the 16th of September. The external auditors have issued an unqualified audit opinion on the Council's accounts, with no significant issues arising from the audit. The annual audit report includes commentary on the Council's financial performance in 2019-20 and on wider issues of financial management, financial sustainability, governance and transparency, and value for money. As noted in the budget update report to Council on the 30th of September, general fund reserves at the end of 2018-20 were £49.3 million, of which £12.9 million are currently unallocated, equivalent to 3.7% of the net revenue budget. I trust the elected members have had the opportunity to view the recording of the Audit Committee's consideration of the accounts, and I'm pleased to welcome Chris Windeat and Alex Berwick from KPMG to address questions on the audit report. As elected members will appreciate, the accounts have been prepared under very different and challenging circumstances this year, and I would like to express my gratitude to colleagues from across the Council for what has been an outstanding team effort. I also wish to thank our external auditors who have provided support and advice throughout in completing their statutory audit within normal timescales in equally difficult circumstances. Happy to take questions, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. I can now invite members to ask questions. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm on page 68 at paragraph 3.2. It says on the audit opinion, KPMG expect to issue an unqualified opinion. Is that a form of words that's unfamiliar to me, because that seems to leave room for doubt? Has that expectation been met, or are there things still outstanding that might affect an unqualified opinion? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Parrott. I hope my external audit colleagues are not going to contradict what I'm about to say, but there's been an unqualified audit certificate issued for the accounts. So that was a prior statement, and we've moved on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Provost Depute. I've got a question for the Head of Finance, and it relates to page 37, Appendix 3, the action plan in response to the audit report. And it's under item 2, fraud and corruption in procurement, which is registered as low grade 3. The risk of frauds are itemised in the action plan with an action that the Head of Finance should raise this with the Executive Officer team, which is fine if the Head of Finance agrees that the risks of fraud should be reported corporately. But if they were to decide perhaps that they shouldn't, how would that be scrutinised by elected members?
Thank you very much. Stuart Mackenzie.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for your question. And I don't know if Chris or Alex would wish to add further commentary here, but the risk identified is a fairly general risk identified by Audit Scotland as one of a number of risks we identify for all local authorities each year. So there's nothing specific in relation to the risk or anything that's come out of the audit in relation to procurement in Perth Kinross Council. As elected members would expect, the Executive Officer team regularly review and discuss and corporate risks and the corporate risk register. In fact, we had that discussion yesterday. So that was my first point of call in terms of raising this issue and the request we've had from our external auditors with colleagues. Ultimately, the corporate risk register will be subject to elected member scrutiny. But I am looking for some advice from my colleague Lisa Simpson on what the forum for that would be.
I'm happy to come in and
yes,
provide some additional support, convener. I think the important point to draw out here for the benefit of providing assurance to elected members is that this has not been a risk that's been identified because it is a particular issue for Perth and Kinross Council. This is a standard risk that is considered and applied in accordance with Audit Scotland guidance, and perhaps Chris or Alex could come in and just confirm that. So there has been no particular risk in relation to fraud that has been identified as pertinent to Perth and Kinross Council that would warrant a specific or direct a management response by way of the Council's strategic risk register. This has not been assessed as being a significant risk. It is something clearly that in terms of good governance we would continually monitor, and if any incidences of significant fraud came to our attention, then that would be managed and clearly escalated in accordance with our risk management strategy. However, this is not a pertinent and particular risk for Perth and Kinross that has been identified, and is simply acknowledgement that in general terms this is an area which all local authorities who are responsible for spending the public pound should be aware of and mindful, and if any issues come to light, these will be brought to the attention of elected members.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, but that doesn't mean to say that.
Sorry, Provost Deputy, I think the auditors were invited to comment on the question and the responses a couple of times, if that was possible.
Yes, they may. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing what's happening, so this is very difficult at the moment.
Thank you very much, Deputy Convener. Yes, I just want to echo what the what Lisa and Stuart have already commented on. The risk of fraud and corruption in procurement is a standard risk that Audit Scotland asked us and every auditor in Scotland to look at either this year or next year as part of their audit procedures. And one of their expectations is that fraud and corruption in procurement is on the corporate risk register. So part of our challenge to management was assessing whether they considered whether it was a risk, and if they do consider whether it is a risk, whether it should be on the risk register. In terms of challenge by elected members, on an annual basis we follow up on all of our recommendations made. So no matter what management elected to do, we would provide commentary and challenge on that, which would then mean that the audit committee members would have an opportunity to discuss that as part of next year's annual audit report.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that.
Excuse me, I don't know if anyone else has lost connectivity. I appear to have lost connection with the Deputy Provost.
The Deputy Provost is currently on mute and we're just trying to resolve our technical issues, Councillor Lyle.
Thank you.
Could I possibly jump in with a second question with regard to the annual report while we've got a brief hiatus? And I wanted to ask a question. The report makes very favourable comment about the delivery in excess of our targets of affordable housing in Perth and Kinross, which is really good. I just wanted to know whether there would be a subsequent drop-off next year, or how we were predicting the delivery of affordable housing in light of the COVID crisis and the interruption to construction would be affected next year. If anyone can answer that. If not, they can perhaps do it outside of the meeting.
Can I just jump in here while Deputy Provost is trying to get back into reality again? Could I suggest that we just move on to, if there are no more questions, that we move on to, if Councillor Lyle to move the report.
Thank you very much, Provost. I think just before I move to the motion for the paper, that Claire Mailer may have an answer to Councillor Barnacle's question. Barrett's question, pardon me.
Okay, that will help.
Hello, yes, in response to Councillor Barrett's question, I can advise, obviously, with the lockdown restrictions and the closure of all of our construction sites, there has been a delay in the delivery of our new build programme, understandably, during this year. But with the step up of activity, we are back on site, we are continuing to deliver. We're currently doing a rephase and reprogramme of the overall sort of programme, the overall capital programme. Wherever possible, of undertaking a catch-up, so hopefully into next year we'll be back on track. But yes, understandably there has been a delay during this year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnacle, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Provost. Just one final question before Councillor Lyle moves the report. It's basically about the general fund reserves. Page 82 of the report talks about the uncommitted general fund balance, 12.9 million. Can I just clarify that actually, if we were to use the bottom figure of 2%, which is the lowest figure of the reserve strategy in the worst situation with COVID, looking to find money, we would have actually an extra 6 million to play with. Is that correct?
Who would like to take that?
I'll take that, Provost. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Councillor Barnacle. And yes, it's a fair observation. We would have some resources to put towards the challenge of COVID if we went to our lowest limit of 2%. I wouldn't recommend that to elected members, given the challenges we will have moving forward, but that remains an option.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, can we move to the Councillor Lyle to move the motion?
Thank you very much, Provost. This report sets out the Council's annual audited accounts for the years 1920 and the independent audit report from the Council's auditors, KPMG. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Chris Windeat for coming along and for his attendance and responding to questions today. The accounts were considered, scrutinised and approved by the Audit Committee on the 16th of September and are presented today for noting. The auditors have issued an unqualified opinion on the accounts for 1920 and on the accounts for the Council's charitable trusts. As the Head of Finance noted, the accounts have been prepared and audit undertaken in unique circumstances. The completion of this exercise to the standard evidenced in the report is, as in our auditor's own words put it, a significant achievement. The audit report looks beyond the financial statements at the Council's arrangements for financial management and sustainability, governance and transparency and value for money, and highlights a number of continuing strengths as well as some areas for improvement. Elected members have had the opportunity to raise questions with our auditors, and I thank them for their attendance again and for their participation. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank officers across the Council for their hard work over the summer in supporting the auditors. I would ask the Council to approve for noting the annual audit report and annual accounts for 1920. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask Councillor Duff, before I do that, one or two people are asking for a recess, and I definitely will have a recess at the end of this particular paper. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. I'm happy just simply to second Councillor Lyle's motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Councillor McCall.
Well, thank you, Provost. Sorry, I thought Councillor Wilson was before me, but I'll step in and do it quickly. I just wanted to add my thanks to the Leader of the Council. We have obviously asked many questions in Audit Committee, but I wanted to add my thanks on record to not only PKMG, but also to our own officers in the Finance Department who have managed to come forward with this, as has already been stated, in extenuating circumstances. And I think our thanks as councillors should definitely go on record, because they've done a phenomenal job in a horrific time, and I think that should certainly be mentioned. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, that's excellent. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Provost, and I just want to add my warm congratulations to the finance team on their achievement. I want to thank the external auditors for what has been a difficult time for them in this year so far. I think this is a very, very positive audit report. It reflects well on the strength of our financial arrangements, our very good governance within the Council, and I think, Provost, on the previous two reports, and Treasury activity and Treasury investment strategy, also reflects the positive comments we've had, and the fact that we've got an unqualified audit report and very strong support from our auditors that of competence, not just within the financial accounts, but also within the governance arrangements of this council. And it's something I certainly am proud of and happy to totally support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm sure everybody agrees with you. We're very lucky to have a very strong financial team led by Stuart. Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'd like to echo the remarks that Councillor Wilson has just made. In fact, I think in some cases his comments don't go far enough, and I think what this report and what the auditors' findings demonstrate is that this council's performance well exceeds competence, and in many cases is sector leading. And if you look at some of the outcomes that are illustrated in this report with regard to what the council is doing with the No One Left Behind programme, helping people back into jobs, helping those furthest from the labour market into work, and also providing work opportunities for young people through the Modern Apprenticeship Scheme. I think that really is excellent work. I think also the work that we're doing with regard to the Scottish Welfare Fund, welfare rights, and collaboration with the Citizens Advice Bureau is again making a real difference to people faced with really challenging circumstances and poverty in Perth and Kinross. Going back to the theme that I touched on in my question about affordable housing, I think it is excellent that we've been able to exceed some really stretched targets for the delivery of affordable housing. It was something that was a priority for me while I was convener, and I'm really pleased to see that it continues to be one for the present convener too. I think one of the important aspects of the report for me is on page 4, under creating a safe and sustainable place for future generations, and it's maybe quite a quiet item, but I think that this council's performance in claiming the £21 million in affordable housing grant on time is exceptional if you compare it to the performance of other local authorities in Scotland, and what it gives us is very high standing in regards with the Scottish Government, because they know when it comes to the delivery of affordable housing that Perth and Kinross Council deliver, and if they put resource into Perth and Kinross Council, then more affordable homes will come on time and on budget as a consequence. So I really wanted to thank the housing team for their efforts, and in particular, because he's no longer with the council, John Cruikshank, who played a really important role in the delivery of our affordable housing programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief. I have said what I'm about to say at Audit Committee when approving the accounts for coming to Council. I'll say it again now in this more public forum, and it's been said already. Stuart Mackenzie and his team have done a fantastic job. The liaison with the external auditors as well, who also have done an excellent job, I have to say, has been exemplary in these very difficult and challenging times. What came over very loud and clear was the pride with which Stuart, Scott and Anne and the team have in their work, and we're as has been said already, we're very lucky to have them all, and I'd like to just thank them all on behalf of the Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Are there any other comments? We move the report.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Great. We'll have a 10-minute recess at the moment. We may have to have 15 to see what goes on, but we'll try 10 minutes at the moment. So we're back in 10:30, say 10:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, can you give me a quick phone message on the mobile phone, please?
That was a big sigh.
I believe we're still live.
Yes.
Right, councillors. Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Loud and
Provost.
clear, yes, Provost. Yep,
Right.
loud and clear.
I'm having problems now as well as everybody else.
Okay.
There was somebody come up, one or two of you wondering, I think Councillor Ling, you mentioned why we're having a recess. I thought you would understand that the reason we were having a recess was because of the IT issues, and I don't think they're resolved yet, but we'll move on as best I can. Here we are. Okay, well, next move on to paper 7 now. Perth Kinross offer COVID-19 update, including recovery and renewal, building an even better Perth and Kinross. I think Karen Reid was going to do it, and I think it's Karen Donaldson that's perhaps taking this paper. Am I correct?
Provost, no, I was not going to do this, and neither is Karen Donaldson. It is indeed Charlene Gill, the Head of Innovation, who will introduce this paper. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you for that.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning. The paper before Council this morning provides a progress update on the Perth and Kinross offer and the priority work streams as agreed in December 2019. It also clearly links the offer with our recovery and renewal programme and the 4E work streams of education, environment, equalities, fairness and economy. The Perth and Kinross offer is at the heart of the overall approach to recovery and renewal and acknowledges that everyone has something to offer. Over the past 6 months, there have been many examples of the offer in practice, volunteers and community groups working together in partnership with the Council to support and assist our most vulnerable citizens. The report provides a progress update on the key priorities of the Perth and Kinross offer agreed in December 2019, building our vision and creating a communication and engagement plan, developing an employee experience, promoting our successes and enhancing digital engagement platforms. Council members have been updated on how work has progressed in each of these areas, despite the pandemic and our continuing emergency response to local outbreaks and restrictions. The report gives an overview of feedback gathered through our communications and engagement activity at Appendix 1, explaining how this will be used to inform our emerging vision and progress our 4 work streams, agreeing actions in a realistic and structured way. As the paper says, this will be an iterative process with feedback from our citizens and communities integral to informing our approach both internally and externally with communities. From the collation of emerging themes, we have also provided draft proposals of the PK offer in practice, intended for further consultation, engagement and collaboration with all of our stakeholders. To support and assist the implementation of the PK offer and recovery and renewal work streams, it was agreed at full council on the 31st of July 2020 that an organisational development plan be developed, intended to progress and embed the culture, behaviours and values required to deliver the PK offer and their recovery and renewal strategy. This is attached as Appendix 3. It outlines a high-level framework for supporting staff and elected members with a range of learning and development opportunities such as coaching, resilience building and leadership skills, community capacity building and delivery of the Think Yes approach. The plan is focused on 4 key programmes of work that we will concentrate on over the next 3 years: enabling cultural change, developing leaders, maximising potential and nurturing good health and well-being. There is also an additional strand which focuses on the development and learning needs of our elected members, and indeed the strategic overview and direction from the PK offer Member Officer Working Group will continue to be fundamental to progress. Taking forward the proposals outlined within the report and accompanying appendices will allow us to continue our recovery and renewal journey and clearly set out our PK offer, demonstrating that at the heart of this work, we believe everyone in Perth and Kinross has something to offer. I would welcome your questions and comments.
Provost Malloy, your microphone is muted.
Councillor Wilson, apologies.
Thank you, Provost, and thanks for the paper and the brief presentation. My question is really about one of the resources. There's a lot of outcomes and proposals in the paper, which obviously we would support, but Given the pressures upon us at the moment, in terms of COVID flooding and other fairly big issues, how do we plan to resource all the energy, I think, in supporting this? I'm particularly interested in the proposals for OD, but it's really about the resources, and will we be able to sustain that?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Sharon, would you like to take that? Respond.
Provost, if I may respond, please. It's actually for the Chief Executive under the Local Government Act 1989, Section 4, to bring forward proposals for staffing across the whole council. Councillor Wilson, as I'm sure you're aware, it would be my intention to make sure that there are proposals in the 21-22 budget to fully resource the Perth Kinross offer and indeed the organisational development plan. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Provost. But my question's in a similar vein. It says in section 2 that there are no direct financial implications of this report. But as I've read the report through thoroughly, and it's a very interesting read. But it must have cost quite a lot of money to actually carry out all the exercises that have been taking place to produce this report. It would help me considerably as a councillor to know just exactly what costs we are incurring in carrying out such exercises. So when it says there's no financial implications, it means that all the work has almost been done free of charge, which is not correct. So could I have a comment on that, please?
Certainly, Councillor Robertson. Provost, I'm happy to respond. Councillor Robertson, you'll be aware that much activity has happened over Teams and the resource input has come from staffing. We don't normally report on the staffing contribution in isolation for any resource contribution. And what you must also remember is that we do have budget motion money that came through to support the Perth and Kinross offer. So all of the work to date is being undertaken by the staff within Charlene's team and from Charlene herself, and of course we have the budget motion money to support it. Because of lockdown, we've been able to do things remotely, which has been a significant saving. Thank you, Provost.
Could I possibly come back on that? So, yes. Thank you for your response, but I still have no idea whether it's this report to take it this far has cost £500, £5,000 or £50,000. So you can see where I'm coming from, and it would have been helpful if we knew when reports were produced the sort of cost that we were incurring to take them forward. Thank you.
And if I may respond to that, please, Provost. I think what I'm saying, Councillor Robertson, is that we don't usually report in this way for any other business activity. We don't necessarily respond. We've just taken the annual accounts, and what we haven't done is quantified the finance team's cost in contributing to the annual accounts paper. So I'm sorry, no, I don't understand the point that you're trying to make.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm on 3.7, and it's back to something I've talked about before, and it's the engagement that we've had from local residents. So we've had I think staff employees 1136, 1472, all good numbers, but only 787 responses from members of the community. And I wonder if in our discussions or with your discussions with your colleagues down in Wigan, did they go through the same difficulty in getting members of their community to engage? And if they did, how did they solve it?
Who would like to take that?
Again, I'm happy to start, and I'm happy if Charlene wishes to add to that. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Our understanding from colleagues in Wigan is that it took them a long time to actually engage with communities in the way that they would have liked to have seen. What they did is exactly what we have been doing in terms of ward meetings, impact assessments, and different ways of engaging with people across the local community. But the key here is it's not a one-off engagement exercise. We need to be resilient and persistent in our engagement and find different ways and indeed reach different audiences. And all of that takes time, over a lengthy period of time, I should say, rather than just a quick fix. So this is the start of a process, not the beginning and the end, if you see what I mean. Charlene, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Karen. I would just add that, again, this is a sustained process. We will continue in an iterative way with our engagement, what I would say is we have been somewhat limited by the pandemic to online methods, and it was our intention to have lots of face-to-face engagement with our seldom heard communities, so we will be pursuing that as soon as we can.
Thank you. Provost, can I come back with a very quick follow-up?
Certainly.
Thank you. Charlene, have you given any consideration, given that we've just had a discussion about money, to perhaps do any kind of sponsored Facebook or social media adverts to try and generate a little bit more response from our communities? So
we have been posting on social media about the engagement methods that we have. So we put a number of posts around our survey, and we'll continue to do that. I'll also have a look into the sponsored posts as you suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Charlene, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Two questions, I think. The first one relates back to when we considered this matter at the meeting at the end of July. And at that time, the Executive Director for Housing and Environment reported that we were imminently anticipating receiving the Plain English Campaign Crystal Mark on, I think it was the strategy, or the communications, part of the communications strategy. And I just wondered whether that had been received and circulated to elected members. That's just my first question.
Okay.
I can absolutely answer that. The Crystal Mark was received and for the strategy and was sent out to all elected members, Councillor Stewart.
Great, thank you. And the second question is regarding section 4.1, the financial implications. I know we've the Chief Executive has said that she will be bringing forward proposals for the revenue budget process for next year. But section 4.1 says that at our last meeting in July, Council requested that a costed report be presented this month following the review of the revenue budget and setting of the capital budget. That was based on an officer recommendation, and we knew obviously at the time that there would be, as detailed in 4.2, a budgetary gap. And as detailed in 4.3, that the crisis was impacting our ability to deliver savings. So it was just really to ask why some costed report has not been brought forward as resolved by the Council in July.
So I can answer that, Councillor Stewart. We're in the middle of looking at the structure within the team that actually undertakes the work on the Perth and Kinross offer, and we will be bringing forward proposals. My apology, it hasn't come forward to this meeting, but I'm sure you'll understand that officers are engaged in other activities at this moment in time, and we want to make sure that the structure enables us to deliver effectively on the Perth and Kinross offer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stewart, as well. Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, thank you. The meeting in Strathclyde was cancelled through no fault of the council's whatsoever. Again, it was technical difficulties, but I'm looking forward to that being reinstated as soon as possible. But the thing is, are there other wards where these meetings haven't taken place? Because until all that information comes into the centre, it will be very difficult to plan, you know, just exactly what the offer is going to be and how it will affect communities.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to take that?
If I can come in, Provost.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, there has been at least one other, to my knowledge, Councillor Jarvis, where we haven't been able to get as full representation as we would like. So what we're doing is going back and engaging with you as elected members to make sure that we've got as wide a community representation as possible for these meetings. We're also looking at whether there is better times for these meetings to be taking place as well, because we realise that a number of people who were involved from our communities have gone back to work or have got other commitments. So if we need to do evening meetings, then that's what we will be doing to engage and get that information as much as we possibly can. The other thing is that these aren't just one-off meetings, you know, so we're trying to get through the first round, but the plan is that, as the paper suggests, that we will continue to do the ward meetings, and we will be looking for your support and making sure that, as I've already said, as wide representation from our communities can attend these.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. My question is also around engagement. Councillor Forbes asked part of it, but I'd like to expand upon that question, if I can get my papers back up again. Yes, in section 3.7. I share Councillor Forbes' concern about the residents of Perth and Kinross, and I would like to understand a lot more about how that reach has been undertaken. But I would also like to ask two or three things are along the same theme. For those people who are not digitally engaged, how are we reaching out to them at the moment? I understand things are difficult, but we should have a strategy for doing that. I'd also like to understand how we're reaching out to young people, particularly those in our schools and in our college, because the Perth and Kinross offer really is for their future. And finally, I'd like to understand more generally on people with sensory and other types of disabilities, how are we reaching out to those groups specifically? Because they may not be able to attend ward meetings or indeed be represented at ward meetings.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Who would like to take that interesting question?
Could I suggest, Provost, that Claire Mailer picks that question up?
Thank you, Barbara. Claire?
Yes, I think I would like to reassure Council that we are absolutely, committed to engaging with all communities. It's really important, if we're truly to deliver on the offer, that we reach out with as many people as possible to ensure that broad representation of all people within all of our communities with a range of views. And it's really important, obviously, that we provide a range of opportunities for people to engage, and that we actually go out to them rather than sitting back and expecting them to come to us. So over and above the direct engagement that we've received over 700 responses for, we've also, as you'll see within the report, received a good number of community impact assessments from a range of services and a range of groups that actually represent a much broader range of people and groups throughout our communities. The Equalities team have also engaged with 21 equality and community groups. They've held a couple of virtual meetings and identified a number of key themes and proposed actions for us to take forward within our equalities work stream. So, as Charlene said, this is an iterative and ongoing process. Our colleagues across the Health and Social Care Partnership, and indeed within Children's Services, are reaching out to a range of different groups and organisations. Likewise, within housing, we're engaging directly with our tenants. And I think two areas that are key here, our digital inclusion strategy is absolutely key, and we are currently working on that. We've got an officer working on that at the moment. We have made technology available and supported a number of harder to reach residents already to access and have a say, and clearly in these times that is more of a priority than ever, so that continues to be a priority. But this is an ongoing iterative process, and a range of opportunities will be made available.
If I may have a follow-up, Provost?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Claire, for your answer. I think my disappointment here is that I've heard most of these answers before to the questions I've asked, and yet it's not included as part of this update on the Perth and Kinross offer, any of that detail and how they intend to move forward with it. I really support the work that has been done to develop and deliver this offer, but my fear is that the people who are most difficult to reach and the ones who will benefit the most are the last to be contacted or last to be considered, and will then have to be merged into what has been established through other routes. And you mentioned, Claire, reaching out to residents, but I don't know if you mean residents in general or whether you just mean council tenants. But there's an awful lot of people, certainly in my ward, and I'm sure in others, who are not council tenants and who are not part of a organisation, a community organisation. So how do we reach out to them? And I just don't see that in this report.
Provost, if I may come in, please. Councillor McCall, thank you for your comments, and I think some of what you say we need to take cognizance of and ensure that our reports better reflect the work that has actually been undertaken. I want to provide assurance that it's not just targeting those groups that are easy to contact, that we do indeed need to engage with those groups that you actually outlined in your opening remarks earlier. And we will be doing that. You will be well aware, Councillor McCall, of different mechanisms that we can use in terms of reaching out to people with sensory impairment or indeed learning disabilities, such as talking mats, etc. All of that needs to feature in our engagement plan. But please be reassured, the Perth Kinross offer is for everyone, and actually by everyone we need to speak with everyone across our local communities and as far as we can, not just those that it's easy to access. So we'll make sure that we better reflect all the activities in forthcoming reports. Provost, I think Jackie Pepper would like to add and provide some detail on the work that's happening across children's services, education and social work. Thank you.
Yes, let's see her come in for the answers. Jackie.
Thank you very much. It was really just an opportunity to respond to Councillor McCall's points about ensuring that our most vulnerable and hard to reach people are engaged in this process. And I know we're about to receive the Chief Social Work Officer's report, and it's really a commitment within that as we are taking forward the development of services, we will do so hearing the voices and taking the views of the people that we work with and their carers. So we need to see this as part and parcel of our ongoing development and not a separate exercise. And I know that Sharon Johnson may be able to say a bit about the work that we're doing in schools as well.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Barrett.
Sorry for the delay there, Provost. Yeah, my question was going to be with regard to engaging with minority communities and communities who have protected characteristics. Some of that we are doing through the Equalities Strategic Forum, and it is slightly disappointing that work hasn't fed into this report, but maybe caught up with in the next one. I was really pleased to see the information that is now on the council's website with regard to the Perth Kinross offer. My question was, and I appreciate the capacity constraints that the council's working on at the moment, but my question was, what work is ongoing to make some of that content available in more accessible formats? And I was thinking about things like audio and video, use of animations. And you know, for a long time the only thing you could find on the council website was the BSL transcript. It's now a year old, and I wanted to ask, you know, what are the plans to refresh both that and the changes that have happened in the meantime. Interestingly enough, I got an email just yesterday from Pink Saltire feeding in their concerns and their priorities for renewal for the future, which I'm very happy to feed in. So,
thank you, Councillor Barrett. Who would like to take that question?
I think Charlene would like to come in.
I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Charlene. We got another glitch.
I've also had the email from Pink Saltire with that information. So we are continuing to work on that. We are getting underway with an animation around the PK offer. Currently, we're also looking at other ways of communicating through perhaps a microsite, which allows us more creativity in terms of our online material. So there are a number of paths we're exploring at the moment in terms of communicating our message.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parrott, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm on page 249, and it's the question, what has been the impact of the pandemic on you and your family? It's very interesting to see the concerns that are being raised. it's also interesting to note the differences being expressed between wards. But I'm interested, what has happened in the tables for the wards for Blairgowrie and Armand and Erne? Were there no responses from there, or have those wards not been included in the tables? Thank you.
Okay, Sharon, is that one for you?
Is that Appendix 1 that you're referring to, Councillor?
I think it is, yes.
And page 249.
Page 249 of the pack, and the ward graphs that follow on from that.
If I may, Provost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Charlene, you're a sort of, I think that we just need to go back and have a look at that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much.
And we'll come back to you.
Thank you. And I think the last one I've got is Councillor Barnacle.
Yes, thanks, Provost. I'm on the theme of moving forward with the offer, Appendix 3, page 270 of the report. It states that the council wish to shift more decision making to local communities with budgets and resources. So, following on from a theme that I've been pursuing with the Chief Executive, I'm concerned to ensure that the role of the elected community councils feature in this. I think they've been rather marginalised by local action partnerships in some aspects. And what is the possibility of local area committees? The Chief Executive will know that I've suggested, along with Councillor Purvis, a pilot committee for Kinross Shire, and also the role of local community development trusts, should they be established. My final point is, and question, is Karen Donaldson the principal officer to drive this forward, because she chaired the ward meetings? Who should I be directing initiatives on this?
Provost, if I may, I will answer Councillor Barnacle's questions. So Councillor Barnacle, thank you. In terms of the principles of the offer, it's about empowering local communities to make decisions and make sure that the needs of individuals in those communities are better served. Now, there are a number of ways that we can do that, but I think I've made my position known that I would support much more local democratic decision making, but I absolutely appreciate it's a matter for full council. So as part and parcel of developing the Perth Kinross offer, we will be bringing forward proposals about how best to do that. It cannot include statutory services, as I'm sure you can appreciate, but we will be bringing forward governance suggestions about how we might be able to test this out. So thank you for raising that, but I'm very clear it's a matter for full council if they wish to go down those routes. In relation to your question, is Karen Donaldson the right person to take this forward? No, the person to take this forward is Charlene Gill, the Head of Innovation, who is responsible for the Perth Kinross offer, supported by Barbara Renton as Executive Director. Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Barnacle.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Purvis, I think this is the last one.
Thank you, Provost. Just very briefly, if I could say I support the comments that have been made by Councillor McCall and Councillor Barnacle on those two issues. And just on the last point you made there, Chief Executive, I think there might be a misunderstanding that we're talking about devolution of decision making within the council in relation to an area committee, so that could of course include statutory services. My question specifically relates to 2.8 in the report about that once we've agreed the broad vision, we'll then move to phase 3. I'm just wondering, and it's not explicit in the recommendations in the report, whether the intention would be to bring that back to full council for agreement and approval before proceeding with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to take that?
Yes, Councillor Purvis, yes, it would be appropriate to bring that forward to council for agreement before proceeding further. That of course adds timescale and delay on to progressing the offer, but it's absolutely appropriate in terms of governance.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions I see no more coming up at the moment. Okay, Councillor Lyle, would you like to move the report?
Provost, are there comments, opportunity for comments, please? I've got my name down for one.
We'll go comments after this, after the report from Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Provost. The Perth Kinross offer is changing the way that the council works with our communities and encouraging a think yes within our workforce. We have heard today about how this has been evident in practice throughout our local areas over the past 6 months, with volunteers and community groups working alongside us to assist the most vulnerable in their neighbourhoods, the communities and the local areas. Amidst the emergency response of the pandemic, we have examples of our offer taking shape. Best practices being established and productive working relationships are emerging from the most challenging of circumstances. To continue changing our relationship from one of provider to one of partner, the offer has started to take shape with the interim feedback report from stakeholders, which will help us to develop and shape our vision and our draft offers, which we'll engage with our communities on, and we will work together to agree a way forward. In addition, the organisational development plan in Appendix 2 detailed how internal support to assist the cultural change required to deliver our commitments within the offer will be implemented. It is recommended that the Council notes the updates on progress made, agrees the proposed direction internally within the organisational development plan and externally with our ongoing communications and engagement activities across different wards. Happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Duff, would you like to second the report?
Thank you, Provost. The Perth Kinross offer aims to change the traditional relationship between council and community. Never before have we experienced change like that of the last 6 months. Never before have we all been as receptive to change either, perhaps. As we get alongside our communities to fashion the vision and definition, and as we look forward to delivering the offer, we recognise the significant effort being produced by the team to date. However, we must bear in mind that many of our officers continue to focus on response to the pandemic, has been remarked upon, and that this council is not operating on a normal footing. So please, let's not forget the challenges this brings. The ongoing emergency response does, however, continue to provide examples and opportunities of how we can change these relationships and establish new and more effective ways of working. Provost, can I thank all the officers involved and Claire Mailer, Charlene Guild and Mark Butterworth in particular for the tremendous amount of work that has gone into developing the Perth and Kinross offer so far, and finish by seconding the report's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Can we move on now to comments, please? Councillor Forbes, you were first on the list.
Thank you, Provost, and apologies, Provost, for trying to butt in earlier on. I'm really pleased to see the progress that the Council's made on this. I think it's fair to say that all of us would like to see things happen faster, but the reality is that most of our officers are working 2 jobs at the moment, and depending on the announcements this afternoon from the First Minister, that workload may well increase. And Provost, just to give you an example, I held a Teams meeting last night between 9:30 and 10 with Barbara Renton because it was the only time she had available to have that chat. So I think we have to just bear in mind that our officers are under a huge amount of pressure at the moment, and I'm grateful for the work they've done on this. Still have slight concerns about the number of people that we're engaging with, but I have been reassured that this was a pattern that Wigan went through ahead of us, so I'm hopeful that as we continue that, we'll start to see more people come on board. I certainly enjoyed the ward meeting we had in the Carsagerry. It was very positive, although only attended to by a few people, but delighted to see in the report that 30% of the responses came from the Carsagerry ward. So I'd like to thank all of the officers for the work that they've done on this, and I look forward to hearing more about it as the weeks and months.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Power.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'd just like to actually follow on from a comment that Councillor Forbes said, obviously about ward meetings, and on page 229 I'm pleased to note that the council intends that meetings become a regular feature of the council's ongoing engagement with communities, and I'm pleased to see that. But I also share Councillor McCall's concern about how we reach out to the more vulnerable and hard to reach members of our communities, and I think we need to be particularly resourceful in how we do that, and to include those particular members of our communities in our ward meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. As I mentioned earlier, I am really enthusiastic about the Perth and Kinross offer, and I really do want it to succeed. However, I just have a word of caution. I'm sure I've raised it at a previous council meeting before. While I support community empowerment for services, I think we need to be really careful that we have some checks and balances in place to ensure that services that are essential but perhaps not statutory are indeed delivered fully into the correct standard and to the widest reach possible. So I'd like to just suggest that that is considered as we go forward to how we make sure that everybody still receives the same degree of services, whether delivered locally or centrally.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Stewart, I think you're next.
Thanks, Provost. I just want to say that I think this is an excellent report. I think I don't share Councillor Forbes's concern about those 780 odd responses from the community. I actually think that's probably, certainly on a first pass, and recognising as officers have said that this is going to be an iterative process. I think that on a first pass during the COVID pandemic, that's a great response rate. I particularly would like to delve a little into the detail of some of those responses and see, rather than just by theme, what some of the suggestions. I know that at this early stage of the offer, communities may not have, and residents may not have come forward with a lot of suggestions regarding what things the council could stop doing, support communities to do more of, or do differently. But I think that generally, I think that that's a great amount of response. And I don't, while I would echo Councillor McCall's concerns about missed out groups or difficult to reach groups, I do think that the report gives us lots of opportunities and avenues to engage with them, and I was reassured by the answers to those questions from officers. Two more brief points. I think I would like to particularly commend the commitment to plain English, and extend my thanks to Mrs. Guild for taking on board a lot of the comments that Councillor Purvis and I had put back in terms of the simplicity of wording on the PK offer page on the council website. I think it's really important that when we are seeking to engage in such a revolutionary and transformative, potentially transformative offer from the council to our communities, that we do so in a comprehensible manner rather than in council speak. And the other point is that I would really like to echo Councillor Barnacle's call, and I'm reassured by the answer that the Chief Executive gave about devolution of decision making to communities. I think it's really important that we could that we attempt to do that, and the offer is a perfect opportunity to try and seek to devolve decision making down from the council and committees into local communities with democratic representation from elected members and community councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. It might be helpful to tell you that we will be providing details for the MOG. Councillor Ling, you're next.
Thank you very much, Provost. I welcome this report. I think it's the way forward the council has to travel. I think I, like Councillor Stewart, I'm not too concerned at the moment about the level of interest. I think the level of interest from members of the public will increase when they see what can be done. So it will be what we actually devolve and how we as a council interact with members of the public and what they want. If they see that their wishes are in some respects being upheld and brought forward the way they want things to work, they'll become more involved. If they feel that we aren't delivering on certain things that they wish to see, they'll become less involved. So I think it will all depend on how the offer functions moving forward that will decide if we have community buy-in or not. I think the bit I read most was about the risk on page 238, where it highlights that it's such a significant piece of work. There are many risks attached to this, but there's also many rewards, and it doesn't really say that. You know, we should have a rewards section under risks. The rewards of getting this right will benefit the council as a whole, the council budget, and all the people of Perth and Kinross. So I think it's definitely worth pushing forward with this. While at each stage, I think elected members have to be involved in seeing how much more is going to be devolved down and the risks associated, and taking what the rewards for that is as well. So at the moment, I will thank Charlene and all her team for the work. They're very accessible and very helpful. I'm sure they'll do that with members of the public as well. So I welcome this paper, and I look forward to see it moves forward. It's not something we can choose to do or not to do. We'll have to do it. As budgets shrink as they come to us, we've got to find another way of delivering all the services the public want, and this is the way forward. I give it my wholehearted support.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. It's a very helpful point. I'm sure we're going to be clear about the rewards in future papers. And the last one I hear is Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Provost. I must agree entirely with the previous two very positive comments from Councillor Stewart and Councillor Lang. I would just add one little point, which has always struck me about these things, and that is this: that we are the link between communities and the council officers, and I do think we are needing to step up to the mark here and realise that the engagement with communities starts with us, and we cannot expect council officers to be as familiar with all activities, all the small groups, etc., all the vulnerable, etc., within our respective communities. And it is up to us elected members to actually make sure that we, when we're requiring community engagement, get out there and engage with the communities ourselves, transmit that information back to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. And if there are no more comments, I don't see any coming up. I just see Karen mentioning something. We very much appreciate the leadership of elected members and local communities. I think we all agree with that. So if there are no more comments, do we agree with the paper?
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. We're now going to move over to paper 8. I'm going to now hand back to Deputy Provost Baird, who's had a very frustrating morning. I think she'll probably have white hair by the time we speak to her today. So I'll pass you over to Kathleen, Deputy Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost, for these very kind words. They're very much appreciated. I have had a stressful morning, but I would really like to thank IT very much for their support to get me back in. It's a great job they're all doing. I think we should all acknowledge they're working under difficult circumstances as well, so well done. Absolutely. We are now at paper 8, the review of the Perth and Kinross integration scheme, and I would like to invite Gordon Patterson, Chief Officer, Director, Integrated Health and Social Care, to introduce the report. Gordon.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Good morning, councillors. This report proposes to the Council the intended approach for progressing a comprehensive review of the Integration Joint Board's integration scheme. The integration scheme being the formal agreement between Perth and Kinross Council and the NHS on the arrangements for delegating community and health and social care services in line with the Public Bodies Joint Working Scotland Act. There's a requirement to carry out a review of the scheme within 5 years to identify whether any changes to the scheme are desirable or necessary. Chief officers from the 3 health and social care partnerships and the Director for Strategic Change from NHS Tayside met with senior officials from the Scottish Government in August to discuss the intended approach. Officers then assessed the current provisions within the scheme and determined that a full and formal review is indeed warranted, and that there are changes that are necessary and desirable. For example, the assessment identified that some groups referenced in the existing scheme are no longer operating. It identified a need for greater clarity in respect of some of the provisions within the scheme. It was identified that some elements are not consistent across the 3 areas, and that changes have been introduced in the intervening period that make aspects of the current scheme outdated. Similar findings have been identified by officers in Angus and Dundee. It's therefore proposed that rather than making refinements to the existing scheme, a comprehensive review is required. For the next scheme should support the effective delivery of community health and social care services to achieve improved outcomes for the people of Perth and Kinross for the next 5 years. It's proposed that this review will be carried out thoroughly and in detail over the next 6 months through the work of lead officers and short life working groups to consider these various aspects. This will involve engaging with relevant stakeholders, proposing and consulting on a new scheme before it's presented for approval by the Council, the NHS Tayside Board and the Cabinet Secretary. I hope this information is helpful in introducing this report to Council. I'd be happy to answer any further questions on what is proposed. Thank you, Deputy Provost. You're on mute, Deputy Provost.
Sorry. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. My question relates to the scope of the review. I'm assuming that similar reviews are taking place in other areas of the country as well at the same time, and that this is not something that's unique to us. And I'm just wondering, is the scope of the review limited, if you like, by present government legislation regulation, or can the review look at areas that might amend present regulations, and is that in the scope of the review, or is the review limited to exactly the existing legislative regulatory framework? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. I'm happy to answer that. The review will be considering within the confines of the legislation and regulations what services should be delegated and how they would be delegated and organised and arranged by the IGB in Perth and Kinross. However, the guidance does have significant discretion within it in relation to determining which services would be delegated to the IGB by either the Council or the NHS in Tayside. Our meeting with Scottish Government officials in August actually highlighted that the arrangements in Tayside are a de minimis delegation of the functions that are prescribed in the legislation, and there is discretion and capacity within that guidance for us to consider any number of other services that in other areas perhaps are delegated. To answer your earlier point, certainly this exercise will be being embarked upon the length and breadth of the country, given that the majority of integration schemes will now have reached their 5-year date, and reviews are now required. So elsewhere, health and social care partnerships, IGBs, councils and health boards will be embarking on a similar exercise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And thank you, Mr. Patterson, for your introduction there. That was quite interesting. I also just want to say thank you to the Chief Executive for her time earlier this week to discuss the paper. The paper notes at 1.6 the requirement of consultation with professional service users and providers of health and social care, and it also notes at 2.2 that there will be close corroboration with the Integration Joint Board and the creation of short life working groups, as Mr. Patterson introduced. However, what I would like to explore a bit is just to ask the Chief Executive for a bit more detail on how she sees elected members will be engaged to allow them to set strategic directions of negotiations as members of one of the parent bodies.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. The document will become a statutory framework and therefore has a legislative base, as I'm sure you understand. I haven't agreed yet with my counterparts in Angus and Dundee how best to do this, but I absolutely recognise the need for elected member involvement, and we'll come back to you and others in terms of a proposal about how we do that. Thank you for the question, Councillor McDade.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, if I may. The first one follows on from Councillor Parrott's question, specifically in relation to the current legislation that we have and the various options that are available to us. Is within the scope of this review the possibility of looking at different models other than integration joint boards and looking at models such as a lead agency model? That's the first question. I'll give them separately if that's okay, Deputy Provost.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding is that this is a review of the existing integration scheme. I don't know perhaps whether Lisa Simpson is able to advise in relation to whether a more fundamental review of the mechanism for delivering integration, as Councillor Purvis has described, is within the scope of this review.
I think there's two distinct things. I mean, in reviewing the integration scheme, obviously we can have a more fundamental consideration as to whether or not the particular body corporate model is appropriate. There's no legal prohibition on that. However, in terms of putting that together, that review would require a significantly longer period than the proposed timescale for bringing back proposals around this, as this would be a wholly different mechanism that would need to be established. In setting up the integration scheme in the body corporate method, that was 2.5 years worth of work for officers to get to that stage. So that would be a fundamental piece of work, that there would need to be a fundamental decision from Council to change that whole framework to move away from what is the normal body corporate model, which is adopted by all councils bar one in Scotland.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis, your second question. Okay,
thank you for that response. My second question follows on from the question that Councillor McDade asked, and I'd like to probe a little bit further on this. While I know the Chief Executive's response about elected members need to be engaged and consulted in this process, I take a slightly different view. Elected members make up the council, and while I wouldn't say it's appropriate for us to be engaged in discussions at an operational level, clearly this is a fundamental strategic review and will have strategic implications for the delivery of the strategic plan for the IGB. So I'm just wondering if we can get a commitment that councillors will be able to set that strategic direction as well as being involved in the ongoing review process, because I can't see that in the paper at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. I'm not in a position to give councillors that commitment at this moment in time, really because the document is a legal document and is underpinned by statutory frameworks. So I'll have to take legal advice on that matter. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. It was to ask, so in section 2.1, the outcome of the initial review was that there are a number of aspects of the scheme where changes were both necessary and desirable, and in 2.2 there was a range of areas where the scheme will need more comprehensive revision. Aside from clinical and care governance, I was wondering which aspects of the scheme are being referred to in particular in those two sections. That's my first question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. So some examples of that are that there are groups referenced in the scheme that are no longer operating. Section 5.3 and 7.3 of the scheme talk about the Tayside IJB's collaborative forum. That, as far as I'm aware, has never been initiated. There is a need for greater clarity in respect of some provisions. Particularly, I would suggest in relation to the respective responsibilities for primary care in terms of the provision and delivery of primary care, the management and oversight and administration of the GMS contract, and the provisions therein for the arrangements that need to be made to provide GP premises. There are some elements in the existing scheme in Perth and Kinross that are not consistent across with the other two areas, and members will be aware that in particular the financial risk sharing agreement outlined at section 9.24 of the scheme is different in Perth and Kinross to the other areas. Changes have been introduced in the intervening period. So, for example, the operational responsibilities for inpatient mental health have transferred into a new directorate in NHS Tayside, and there are proposed changes to the oversight of clinical and care governance. And there are some legacy arrangements that need revised. For example, Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership and IJB are currently contributing funding towards 2C practices, GP practices in Angus and Dundee. And this is a legacy arrangement that we have all agreed needs to be reviewed and adapted.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just on the point about the risk sharing agreement, I would note that in the written answer I got, thank you for allowing me to put that to you in advance, said that the IJB itself had concerns about that. I think the issue is simply that it was that it was defaulting to a situation which is different from Angus and Dundee, and it was a question of whether the council and NHS Tayside wanted to continue with that situation, but the IJB itself didn't have an opinion on that matter, and of course one size doesn't fit all, so it doesn't need to match. But my second question is, the duty to revise the integration scheme is upon both the council and the NHS board. But there's no reference really to the interaction between what it's proposed we agree at the council meeting today and what the board of NHS Tayside might agree to do. Although I note that there have been discussions and it's not anticipated there will be disagreements about the need to review the schemes over the coming months or on the process of doing that. My question is, come to the end of the process, and I think this reflects the questions that councillors McDade and Purvis were asking. Should the council decide, as it would be its right to do, not to adopt the integration scheme, or should the board of NHS Tayside diverge from what the council agrees? How do we resolve any differences between those two opinions? What's the mechanism for resolving what the council might want versus what the board of NHS Tayside might want?
So, Deputy Provost Lisa Simpson would like to respond, and I may come in after Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ultimately, that this is a partnership agreement between both parties. So unless both parties are agreeing to the model, then there will be no agreement, and it will probably require ministerial intervention to sort that out if we can't come to consensus. But if the partners can't agree on the model, then that would be extremely disappointing.
Thank you. Deputy Provost, if I can add to that, clearly we want to get to that stage, and we would try to work through those differences between both respective chief executives on behalf of the NHS board and indeed the elected members. But as Lisa has said, if we don't get to a resolution that is acceptable to all parties, then we would have to engage with Scottish Government, and ultimately that may involve ministerial direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, I see you have a point of order.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. There was a point of clarification, but the Chief Executive has just advised that the dispute resolution procedure is initially for the Chief Executive of both the Council and the NHS to examine. So,
thank you, Councillor Barnacle.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Provost. My point and question is, I believe that one of the problems with the previous scheme was there was a certain amount of criticism about the value of the involvement of voluntary groups in the care sector and their lack of voting power. Now, under recommendation D of 3.1, there's talk about consulting with interested persons or groups. I'm assuming that that will include the voluntary care sector and the question of whether they should have a right to vote in any new scheme review. Could I just have some assurance on that?
Yes, I could certainly provide that assurance, Councillor Barnacle, both in terms of the general need and ambition to ensure that we consult widely with the third sector, but equally it is a matter of particular interest within the IJB that we consider whether or not we can either increase the number of members who are carers or service user reps onto the IJB, or whether or not we can introduce provisions where they become voting members. So those aspects are certainly under active consideration.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I don't see any members.
Can I perhaps offer some clarification?
Yes, please.
In some of these points, there's absolutely no issue in terms of broadening the consultative base, but the actual framework around voting, parts of that are prescribed, so that would need to be looked at carefully to see whether or not there's scope and discretion to review that. But it's not something that I don't think we're in a position to give you an assurance on that particular point at the moment. We would need to refer back to the primary legislation and the secondary legislation which sets out the voting provisions as regards integration joint boards.
Thank you very much. So I see there are no further questions. Can I invite Councillor Lyle to move the report, please?
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and welcome back. This report marks the beginning of the process of reviewing and revising the Health and Social Care Integration Scheme for Perth and Kinross. It has been 5 years since the scheme was approved by Scottish ministers, and officers have identified that changes need to be made to ensure that the scheme remains fit for purpose for the continuing 5 years. The report sets out that the work to review the scheme will be progressed by NHS Tayside and also in collaboration with Angus and Dundee City Councils. There will be consultation with stakeholders, including the IJB board, all of which will be welcomed. The task of revising the scheme is a significant one, and the timeline for both consulting on the draft revised scheme and bringing the final revised scheme back to Council for approval reflects the size of the task and the intention to carry out this work thoroughly. It also takes into account the uncertainties which have arisen because of the current pandemic. I'm happy, therefore, to move the paper. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Councillor Ahern to second the report, please?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I'm happy to formally second the report.
Thank you very much. I can now invite members for comments. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I was very interested to hear in questions from Mr. Patterson that our present scheme is, as he described it, a de minimis scheme. It's probably entirely my fault that I wasn't aware of that or realised that. But I just wonder if it might be possible for a briefing paper to be brought forward to councillors to explain, if you like, just what the scope that is possible is within the legislation and where we fit into that at present for a better understanding of the field of play, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a few comments, if I may. The first is that I think that this review is necessary. I agree with that. There are a number of areas, particularly in relation to the risk sharing agreement, where I and other Integration Joint Board members would like to see progress, and indeed reviewing the way in which we engage with community groups and organisations, and ensuring that our non-voting members at the moment have more of an ability to influence decisions that are made, given their lived experiences. I do have to say that I'm very disappointed by the way that this report has been brought forward, and the motion that has been moved. I would have amended this had I thought that I would have support for it across the chamber, but I'm not sure that I do, so I'll just make my comments on this. I think this is a fundamentally strategic matter. It influences our ability to deliver on our strategic objectives in the delivery of health and social care, and that the scope of the Council's engagement in that review should be ordinarily, I think, led by elected members. So I'm disappointed that we seem to only be being consulted on that. I think there is a real concern that when this scheme comes back, that it does not reflect the views of this council, and I can make clear now that I will not be supporting a scheme should it not reflect the views that I and others have. There are a number of other concerns that I have about the references to local authorities in other parts of Tayside. While we do need, of course, to engage with those, I think there needs to be a recognition that there are different needs in different local authorities, and simply because NHS Tayside thinks it's more convenient to have schemes that match up for Perth and Kinross, Angus and Dundee, I don't think that we should necessarily therefore have to go along with that. I also support some of the comments that have been made about the lead agency model, and certainly as far as I'm concerned that would be preferable to the current situation. I still lack confidence in the governance arrangements that are in place at NHS Tayside. I think that's something that we should all still be concerned about, given the special measures that they have been in. So with that, I'll conclude my comments, but just to say that I do hope there is proper engagement and strategic direction given by elected members on this issue. Otherwise, I can envisage problems when this scheme comes back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. There's a slight delay when I try to unmute my microphone. Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I would actually echo Councillor Parrott's request for a briefing paper, or perhaps even a briefing session, because many of the councillors that currently make up of this council, including myself, were not here when this scheme was set up. So perhaps it would be helpful to provide something for us so we understand what the options and scopes are. So I thank you, Councillor Parrott, for suggesting that. My comments mainly, though, are around what I said over in the last paper, to make sure that when we are engaging with other groups, that we make sure we make it as broad as possible when we're reviewing this scheme and its effectiveness. In particular, those people who are in receipt of social care support. My casework is very much dominated by social work cases, and yet that's managed under the auspices of the Health and Social Care Partnership, which is fine in itself, but as councillors we have no oversight sometimes on how that gets delivered, or what the policies or strategies are. So I think it's important that you engage with the people who receive the services as well as the people who deliver them. And the communication and engagement for all of those groups, who very often are those most in need, is crucially important when we go into the review of this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Chief Executive has taken notice of that, and a briefing paper or a session will be organised. Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And yes, I think I would like to echo some of the other comments. I think a briefing session would be very helpful for members, and I also think that from my point of view, a review of the integration scheme can only go so far, because having been a member of the Integration Joint Board for 3.5 years, along with Councillor Drysdale, I think we now serve as the longest serving members ever on the Integration Joint Board in Perth and Kinross. And to me, I think Integration Joint Boards are a fundamentally flawed structure, and that seems to be a similar message that has been seen elsewhere in the country. There was a governance review undertaken at a national level on IJBs to look at some of those fundamental problems. So hopefully that this iteration, the second iteration of integration schemes across the country will improve governance arrangements and will improve the effectiveness of IJBs. However, I do have concerns about it is effectively another layer of public agency bodies when actually perhaps we need to be getting down to a more simpler system. And I think that perhaps the Perth and Kinross offer will allow us here in Perth and Kinross anyway to look at alternative models. I would favour perhaps a lead agency model on our way to a single public authority. Personally, that is my end goal, and I'm quite happy to state that here for public consumption. I do think that would be the most effective use of public money and would allow the public the best opportunity to have a say over their health and social care through democratic process. I think that, as I say, this offers an opportunity to resolve some of the issues, and as a member of the IJB Short Life Working Group on Governance, I can say there are a lot of issues, not just in the integration scheme, but in a lot of the other aspects of governance which we are working through and we are trying to improve. But I think from my point of view, this is a fundamentally flawed structure that actually doesn't achieve what it is designed to achieve, which is essentially the proper integration of health and social care. And I think you'll only get that when you have one integrated body that oversees all of it. So hopefully this can be a stepping stone towards improving governance and hopefully, from my point of view, on a way to perhaps a single public authority. And I'll leave my comments there. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I welcome this report. As a member of the IGB, I recognise that there are a number of aspects of the scheme where changes are both necessary and desirable for all parties to reflect the current and ongoing practice as outlined by the Chief Officer. I'm grateful for confirmation that both IGB members and elected members will be closely involved in the consultation process for the review and look forward to taking part in that. Deputy Provost, I have every faith in the Chief Officer and the Chief Executive to bring forward a revised scheme in the best interest of the residents of Perth and Kinross and this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I think it is important to understand fully what this report is about and what it's not about. And certainly my understanding is that it's not about a wholesale review of the scheme of integration or wholesale change to the scheme of integration. As somebody who was involved closely in the development of the previous scheme of integration, I can testify to the amount of work that went into developing that scheme and the full consideration that was given to alternative models such as the lead agency model, which I think has only been adopted by Highland region, and I think there have been significant problems both budgetary and in terms of delivery of integrated services in Highland that would certainly sound alarm bells to anybody who might want to consider going down that route. Much as I share some of Councillor McDade's enthusiasm for a single public authority, I think there is absolutely no appetite whatsoever within the Scottish Government to support areas such as the island authorities that want to pursue that for reasons of geography and improved service delivery. I just cannot see that being a starter, and I don't honestly think it's relevant to the content of today's report. Obviously, we will get advice back from the head of legal services, but again, my understanding is that the voting rights of members from either health and the council are prescribed in legislation and aren't open to be expansion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else wishing to make any comment, so I would like to thank you all for your comments regarding this paper. So we're happy to agree the content of the report, or the sentiment behind the report. Thank you very much.
Read the report.
Thank you. We will now move on to paper 9, the Chief Social Work Officer's Annual Report, and I'd like to invite Jackie Pepper, Chief Social Work Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. The Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report would usually come to Council at its December meeting. However, it was important to bring this report forward and provide elected members with assurance about the effectiveness of the delivery of statutory social work functions, not only over the last financial year for 2019-20, but also during the COVID-19 pandemic response from March 2020. I'm confident that our social work and social care staff across all sectors have done everything possible to minimise the impact of COVID-19, and that they have acted professionally, selflessly and safely through this unparalleled time. They've stepped up to the plate to reliably provide the essential services for people from the point of lockdown, learning to work in new ways and managing increasingly complex circumstances and entrenched difficulties. The work has been relentless and the unremitting demands of the pandemic has continued. It is to their credit that we've not needed to implement the powers provided to us, which allows us to ease certain statutory social work functions set out in the Coronavirus Act 2020. So staff have played an important role in working in partnership with the Welfare and Communities Group and the Two Sisters response, and ensure that that was a joined up response to people with both short and long-term needs during lockdown and going forward. Nevertheless, the full impact of the pandemic on our most vulnerable people has yet to be fully understood. There are likely to be latent issues still to surface, and the length of time that it will take people to recover from the entrenched difficulties that they've experienced may be longer than anticipated. The full impact on our partners and our community organisations and third sector partners is also yet to be fully known. This report pays tribute to the skilled and devoted staff who've managed these additional demands in both adults and children's services, and that the demands have been more acute, certainly since March 2020. I acknowledge how difficult that will be to sustain in the longer term without additional resources to ensure we do not shift focus away from earlier intervention and service improvement. I've highlighted areas with pressing need for additional capacity in the short to medium term, and I'm pleased that since this report was written, that Council agreed at its meeting last week to fund an additional social work staff to meet the demands within child protection and looked after children for the next 2 years. So looking back to 2019-20, overall performance in securing high quality experience for people who use social work and social care services has remained good. And the continued improvements in outcomes for children and young people in need of care are demonstrated, showing the focus that prevention is having a positive impact on outcomes and bringing down spend on external residential placements. Within adult services, the strong partnership approach that exists at team and practitioner level continues to be evident. Determined and committed staff, excuse me, I'm going to have to go and
Oh, this is an exciting day we're having today. We're all humans and we have that, some will have animals that need to be looked after as well, so.
So determined and committed staff are delivering high quality services to our citizens. So looking ahead to 2021, the report sets out key areas for continued development and sets an ambitious agenda for pressing ahead with a review and transformation in line with the principles for recovery and renewal and the Perth Kinross offer, which will reduce recurring demand pressures and secure earlier intervention and prevention. That includes taking forward the promise, the report of the Independent Care Review, enhancing family support and taking forward the lessons from REACH into a younger age group, developing new models of support for adults with complex needs and improved transitions from children to adult services, continuing the support for care home and care at home services to manage the ongoing impact of COVID-19, and procuring a new fit-for-purpose social work and social care IT system and the associated staff development from early in 2021. Those are just some examples. So this report's a real team effort, and we would welcome your questions and comments. So in addition to myself and Gordon Patterson, we're joined by Diane Fraser, Head of Adult Social Work and Social Care, Hazel Robertson, Head of Services for Children and Families, Nicola Rogerson, Service Manager for Criminal Justice Social Work, and hopefully Ross Drummond, who I know has had some connection problems, are all here to assist in answering some questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Can I invite Councillor Pover, please, first question.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. First of all, I'd just like to say thanks to Jackie as Chief Social Work Officer and her team for a very positive and in-depth report. It's quite impressive. So I'd like to turn to page 299, and it talks about effective engagement and participation with adults at risk and their carers using a range of technologies will be a priority going forward given the experiences under COVID-19. And I just wonder if we could have maybe an example of what those technologies would be.
Thank you, Councillor Pover. And so you will know that we've developed a range of online tools and apps that we've used with young people that have been particularly successful, and that would be one example. But I know it might be helpful for Hazel Robertson, who is working with our Adult Protection and Child Protection Executive Group, is leading a short life working group to look at new practices that have come to be directly as a result of COVID-19. Hazel, I'm just wondering if you want to give some examples for Councillor Pover.
Yes, certainly, Jackie. As Jackie's just mentioned, Councillor Pover, there's a short life working group being established to look specifically at the public protection areas. So all of those involved in child protection, adult protection, the multi-agency public protection arrangements, and violence against women, and drug and alcohol partnership, to look at, what has been successful over this last 7-month period now, and really what do we want to maintain. We've surveyed the staff who are directly involved in delivering these public protection services, and we this week actually are about to launch a survey of those who have been subject to any public protection resource to really ascertain their views, how have things felt during that process when it's been virtual, or whether they have had to have face-to-face contact. And we hope to glean quite a lot of information. The report that will be compiled on the findings from these surveys and from some of the work that we're doing as a short life working group will go to the Chief Officers Group for any actions that we need to take forward into the future.
Thanks very much, Hazel. That's been really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Provost. If I would ask first of all if we could get some reassurance that the Council has at its command sufficient resources to provide resilience over the winter to continue to fulfil these important obligations. I'm most concerned about the resilience required to deal with probable sickness and associated quarantine that may be coming, as well as the uncertainty of Brexit. And do we know that if our partners such as PCAVs and others also have access to sufficient resources to ensure that this good work can continue?
Chief Executive will answer this question, I think.
Councillor Simpson, thank you. We are actually looking at having COVID responders, so if there is another local outbreak, we'll be looking at redeploying people, for example, into health and social care or to support other areas of council business. So that's all within our outbreak management plan. Thank you, Provost, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much for that reassurance. I think that makes us all feel safe to know that you've got contingency plans, as I'm sure you do. Councillor McCall.
Might I squeeze in another question?
Yes, okay, yes.
Sorry, just quickly, I notice in the appendix 316 on page 47, it reference to a smart flat at Carpenter Court, which has been on the go for a year or so. And I just wondered if we had any further information, given how much more useful perhaps now in the pandemic a smart flat might be, and if there might be any video briefing available to ourselves and to others to see how useful the aspects of the smart flat might be.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Simpson, we do have a commitment to producing a video. I'm wondering if Diane could give an update on where we are in terms of a date for production of that and how that might be available to elected members.
Hello, Diane.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Signal. Unfortunately, I don't have a date for the release of the video, but it is certainly something that we are looking at, both for people who require the smart flat equipment. We also have online information that we're developing so people can access the equipment that is available so they can see how it works. But we will provide a further briefing through Jackie in terms of the dates.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is for Jackie, I presume. On page 309, or section 3.8 on self-directed support. I'm curious why you've only reported on options 1 and 2 and why there has been no report on the uptake on options 3 and 4. But what I'm really would be interested in is there any analysis or data available on why people choose not to take up the self-directed support? Because on the face of it, it would give clients far more control and far more autonomy on how their support and services would be designed and delivered for them.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor McCall. I think you've answered your own question in that we're reporting on that because what that does is give a sense of the number of people who are taking complete ownership and choice and control over the services that they're receiving. So that's what we report on each year within this report and elsewhere. In terms of some of the analysis behind the reasons for not doing so, those will be complex, but there's also an example in the report where there is a small organisation that's working very closely, called Supporting Choices, working very closely with people so that they can explore what would work best for them in their personal and life circumstances, because sometimes people need support to be as creative as they possibly can be, because they will always wish to receive what's within their sphere of experience. So it's really about enabling and helping people to understand how that might be delivered differently. So additional support in that is an area that can help people to move in that direction. I don't know if Diane would want to add anything to that.
Yes, I think nationally we've seen a review through Audit Scotland, so we recognise the need to promote SDS and to make it easier for people to access. So we had a relaunch of self-directed support implementation plan last year, and this year the Chief Social Work Officer at Scottish Government is also leading a national review in the implementation of self-directed support nationally. So they're going to come back with further recommendations on the implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just to supplement that, the Lifelong Learning Committee will receive before the end of the year, or certainly as soon as standards are available nationally for self-directed support via Social Work Scotland, a strategy to continue to extend this across the full range of children and families that we're working with, and not just limited to children with disabilities. So we do have a strategy to extend this further. Thanks.
May I ask a supplementary, please?
Yes, you may.
It's just really in the last comment that Jackie Pepper made there about a report coming to lifelong learning. Of course, many people in receipt of support and perhaps accessing self-directed support are not children, and very often are not, that they're in a family of their own, so to speak. So how do we get information around services or access to self-directed support for them?
Yeah, I think I made that point specifically because there is a need to promote that further within children and families, because the success has been greater within adult services where we recognise that. The information in relation to self-directed support will be reported through the Health and Social Care Partnership and its annual performance report, so you will get further detail in those reports to Council as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Provost Depute. My question is regards paragraph 3.4 of the report on page 12, which shows a graph of the year-on-year increase in the use of emergency detention certificates, more than doubling over the last 4 years. The paragraph also mentions that short-term detention certificates are preferable to the emergency certificate, and that it provides greater rights of challenge and appeal against those being detained. It seems quite worrying to me that there has been such a dramatic increase in the use of EDCs. Can the Chief Social Work Officer tell us what is being done to address the shortage of psychiatrists, and in what circumstances could people in distress who are going to be detained have their conditions triaged to see whether a short-term detention certificate is more appropriate?
Thank you very much. Jackie.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. The trend that you're seeing there in terms of that increase, we know is directly related to a shortage of psychiatrists, as you pointed out, and that is something that NHS Tayside is responsible for and will set out as a key priority within its mental health strategy, and certainly committed to that. And I wonder if Gordon Patterson would have any further detail about the detail in terms of the commitment to recruitment and what might lie beneath that.
Yes, thanks, Jackie. So this continues to be a challenge for NHS Tayside. Consultant psychiatrist recruitment is a national challenge, and Tayside has been particularly affected by the lack of available consultant psychiatrists. In an attempt to address that, an associate medical director was appointed last year on an interim basis, and he, Dr. Mike Winter, has been continuing to seek to recruit consultant psychiatrists. He has also negotiated with a number of locum psychiatrists that they would take on longer term contracts, and this provides a degree of capacity and consistency of care that was otherwise lacking. Consideration is also being given to how advanced nurse practitioners can take some activities away from consultant psychiatrists to provide that additional capacity, and to ensure that consultant psychiatrists are able to focus their time and attention exclusively on those actions and responsibilities that they alone can discharge. I see that NHS Tayside have now advertised for a permanent associate medical director for mental health, as well as for a director for mental health, and hopefully those will be additional measures that will seek to address the challenges that you have rightly highlighted that have to be of concern. The individual circumstances pertaining to the determination around whether emergency detention certificates or short-term detention certificates are in place is the subject of ongoing consideration and review, and is reported to the monthly meetings of the Quality Performance Review for Mental Health Services. So these matters are not going unattended or unnoticed, but we're significantly impacted by some of the challenges nationally in relation to the recruitment and retention of consultant psychiatrists.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shires, you have a question.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My principal question was around the self-directed support, which has been answered. My other question was, you know, about the resilience of our staff as we head into, and the Chief Executive did kind of allude to that, but it's to find out what support and you know, for people that are dealing with real frontline services such as this. And then the report talks about these people stepping up to the plate and acting professionally and selflessly and safely. It's bearing in mind that a lot of them are doing this from their home environment, and that can bring its own challenges, is to find out what support mechanisms are put in place to support staff as we potentially head into another challenging couple of months. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Shires. I think one of the things that's very clear in this kind of work is that individual practitioners get great support and great strength from working in teams, and the ability to come together as a team and to have regular supervision, both in a planned way but also in an ad hoc way, because we're dealing with very complex circumstances. So and in terms of our office remobilisation, it's been a priority that we ensure that staff delivering frontline social work services, particularly those in duty and responding 24/7, have access to a building to work from, and along with their colleagues, and get support from their colleagues and from their line managers. So we've made sure that that's a priority in terms of our recovery and remobilisation into workplaces. It's about supporting those team leaders to ensure that they are in touch with staff, and that they are supported as well. So we need to work with them to work through what works best in these new circumstances. And I have to say that people are pretty imaginative. They are working in strong teams. And one of the things that we do benefit from in Perth Kinross is that we actually have very stable teams. We don't have high staff turnover. So, you know, people do know each other. They do work well together, and that we're continuing to support that. And I think that the IT and the technology and the support that has gone into that to make these new ways of working easier from the outset has been quite remarkable, and how people have managed to move into that has been great. So if we think about some of there are challenges around that, but there are also opportunities, and we have the procurement of the new IT system coming before the end of this year, and starting to implement that early 2021, in January 2021. And we know that will actually work better for staff and remove some of the clunkiness of the current system that they're working with. So that will relieve a lot of the pressures that they're currently experiencing. So all of these things are in train. And I know certainly from the people that are here today, and Diane and her teams, and Hazel and her teams, that support for staff and making sure that they take time out, that they rest, and that they are supported, and that we help them to work flexibly, whichever way works best for them, has been high on the agenda for throughout COVID-19, and continues to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I will invite Councillor Lyle to move the report, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. The Chief Social Work Officer's report for the financial year 1920 clearly shows the extent to which social care and social work services are supporting better outcomes for the people across Perth and Kinross. It also shows the extent of support, care and protection provided to the vulnerable and at-risk people across all our communities during COVID-19 from the end of March until July 2020. This Council has a responsibility to make sure that our social care and social work services are delivered to the highest professional standards. We also had a responsibility to ensure that essential services are provided effectively during lockdown. I would like to thank the Chief Social Work Officer and the team behind her for this report and bringing this report to Council, in order that we can be assured that our most vulnerable people have continued to be served well throughout the pandemic. This report highlights how effectively social work and social care services have responded to the challenges of the pandemic. Staff have clearly gone the extra mile to ensure people were kept safe and provided them with the care they needed during these very challenging circumstances. They have worked tirelessly and in a person-centred way. They have adopted new ways of working to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our communities experience good quality care and protection. There are many examples of how social work and social care services are continuously improving. Please note the results of external scrutiny also validate the high quality of our social care and social work services. They are also encouraging signs of innovation and investment in new ways of working, where the right approaches to addressing long-standing pressures will help in some areas. Nevertheless, the additional demands presented by COVID-19 are also carefully set out, and the full impact of the pandemic is yet to be seen. I am pleased that the Council approved additional social workers for our child protection and looked after services for the next 2 years at its meeting on the 30th of September. This will help to address the additional demand pressures which are set out in the report. The Chief Social Work Officer's report to the Council provides a valuable tool to gauge the quality of our social care and social work services, and it is very pleasing to note that this has remained very positive in the most challenging of times. I'm happy to move this report and thank the officers involved for producing the report at this challenging time. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd like simply at this time just to formally second the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now invite comments. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm not sure if everyone noticed it, but the front cover on the document on page, what page is it? Page 291. Absolutely beautiful artwork done by one of the ladies from Owls, and it really set the tone for the document about, you know, sort of positivity, but also the real difference that our Chief Social Work Officer and her teams make to the lives of you know, people right across Perth and Kinross. It's absolutely a beautiful piece of work. I'd also like to just draw councillors' attention to the podcast that was done. I don't know if anyone's been listening to them on Eric, but there was a podcast by Jackie, Hazel and Diane, which again would give you a little bit of an insight into the human element behind this report, which is well worth listening to. I think all of us would just be united in just wanting to thank everyone for the efforts that they've put in through what has been a really difficult time, but also throughout the report there's lots of detail about the ongoing work to improve services, and I think that's very much got to be our focus, that it's not just about the reaction to dealing with the crisis that we find ourselves in just now, but it's also about developing and building a better future for everyone across Perth and Kinross. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shires. Councillor Ahern.
Deputy Provost, thank you for allowing me to comment on this excellent report. I'd like to thank all officers for their work and their responses during the COVID crisis. Whilst the COVID crisis has been and still is hard for everyone, it's been particularly difficult for the groups of individuals that are looked after by the services that are covered in this report. And having to carry out their work remotely would have produced even more challenges that officers would normally have had to face. The work carried out by officers is outstanding, and this cannot be stated enough. Some of the work is recognised nationally. However, forgive me for highlighting two particular projects covered in the report, and that is the Caledonian Project and Owls. The Caledonian Project started in 2019 to address men and domestic abuse. This has proved to be a timely intervention, as domestic abuse is on the rise and is one of the unfortunate downsides to the lockdown, and this project will hopefully go a long way to helping those who commit the domestic abuse. Owls is a project that's been outstandingly successful and is working with women in the criminal justice system. I've met some of those women who have been through the programme, as well as some that are currently going through the programme, and they say that without Owls they may not be in the place they are now, and out of that dreadful cycle that so many fall into. I look forward to seeing the new service that for the men that will run along the same lines as ours and hope for similar successes. Once again, well done to all officers and an excellent report. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pover.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'd just like to refer to page 329 of the report, and Jackie, to you as Chief Social Work Officer. I'm just delighted to see that for a period of 3 months, Children's Hearing Panel members provided feedback to services for children, young people and families with a view to ensuring that reports contained all the necessary information and analysis to enable panel members to come to the most appropriate decisions about children. And I'm really reassured to see that part in the report, because I think historically that has always been an issue, and to see that that's been addressed so effectively, I'm delighted to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd also like to congratulate everybody involved in creating this report. I want to be specific about the question that Councillor Barrett raised regarding consultant psychiatrists. And there is without doubt a national shortage of consultants, but for the last 8 months I've been looking in my copy of the British Medical Journal, and there hasn't been one advert for an NHS Tayside consultant psychiatrist in the last 8 months. And unless you advertise for these people, you're not ever going to get them. One of the points which maybe if people aren't aware of, one of the roles of a consultant in medicine and psychiatry is no different as the training of junior medical staff. And without adequate numbers of consultants, it is highly likely that the General Medical Council will visit Tayside and take away all their trainees in both psychiatry and general medical practice. And that would be an absolute disaster, and I hope we put pressure on NHS Tayside to attempt to fill these posts with medically trained consultant psychiatrists as a matter of severe urgency. Nurse practitioners are very, very good at service provision, but there are wider roles that the medically trained consultants have to do as part of their job. And I just want to stress that it's really serious.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'll be quite brief because obviously much has been said already, but I'd just like to record my thanks to the Chief Social Work Officer for her comprehensive report, and to all those in social work service who've aided her in this. This report covers some 57 or so pages, which reflects the wide range of work carried out and work that must be carried out to help those in most need in our society. The contents make for excellent reading, and all, from you, Jackie, all the way down the line, should be commended for the work you do, most recently in exceedingly difficult circumstances, and circumstances which are likely to continue for the foreseeable future. And however, whilst these reports such as this must be detailed, for me there are 2 words that you used at the beginning to sum it all up: commitment and compassion, and that's what's needed all the way down, and with that you can't go too far wrong. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and just to follow on equally briefly to Councillor Braun, good leadership, good training, good innovation, good resourcing and good results, I think is how I would sum it up. I want to just commend the report and all the work that's been done by the Deputy Director and all of the staff. It's quite difficult to pick out, it's easy to pick out centres of excellence, but it's quite difficult in a way to do that because there's so much valuable work being done with the most vulnerable people in our society under the most difficult circumstances. I warmly commend the report and everyone involved in the preparation of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors, for your very, very kind words about this report, and I agree completely. This is an outstanding report, and these reports are, it's just not about words. There are people who have gone the extra mile to make this work. So I think at the moment, our people in Perth and Kinross are in very safe hands. So please convey our thanks to everyone who's been involved. Absolutely first class. Councillor Lane, you've come in with a late comment. I thought, Councillor Lane. Councillor Lang, are you still there? Well, we'll go to Councillor.
Sorry about that, Deputy Provost. I forgot to unmute myself, so apologies. No, I'm really concerned about Councillor Reid's comments there. So it would be really useful if you could proof these and fact check them and send us through maybe the copies to the rest of the councillors, because it's not my understanding at all of what he's saying. So I wouldn't want councillors at PKC trying to run NHS's Tayside's HR responsibilities. So if we could have some
right, thank you, Councillor Lang. That's not in the report. We're here to talk about the report. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would very briefly like to just echo Councillor Lang's comments regarding Councillor Reid's inaccurate comments, which are outdated, and there is an improvement in the position at NHS Tayside, and I would like to place that on record.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no other comments in the chat. So now we are going to have a break for lunch, as was suggested. We'll be breaking for 1 hour for lunch, and I can ask members to please leave this meeting and then you rejoin as in the calendar part 2. So thank you all very much for this morning. And I regret bitterly that my connections were not good at the start of the meeting. So thank you. Are we agreed that report?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Sorry. Right. Thank you.
Yep.